everybody for joining today. I do want to just remind you that these flock talks are recorded. And just before we get started, let's please everyone mute your phones. That'll help us be able to get through the presentations. And then if we have some time later on, I'm sure we'll be happy to answer any questions. But thank you so much for joining this Flock Talk today. Dr. Josh Dinas is with us, and he's going to give all of us just a regrounding on Embrex technology and everything that it means for our customers, and how important it is for everyone. So even if you think you know everything there is to know about it, please pay attention. And I'm sure you'll find something out that you didn't know before you joined. So Josh, go ahead.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, James and Carrie, for putting this together and kicking us off. Yeah, we're going to be diving into Embrex. We were the first to innovate in this space and come to market, and we're still the best. We're still the market leader. And I wanted to provide some insights to our competitor investigation studies that we've been doing. We've been looking at competition, competitor devices in the field. And I can say confidently with good news that we're still the best. And I'll share some insight to those trials that we've been doing. But I also wanted to, as Carrie said, reground us on really what is the benefits of Inova. Why is that a used technology? And why is Embrex the best option out there? To give us all some good talking points. So whether you're an account manager talking with a customer, your field service, and you're a big talking point of this. But when some of the details come up with the technology, or customers are talking about questions they have of us over competitors, maybe you'll have some new nuggets and information to give to them and can be better prepared to ask questions. So as we go through this, if there's a specific technology or point you want to break for a question, I'm totally open to that, and I'll also leave some room at the end. But bottom line, Embrex is the best. We started over 30 years ago with this innovative technology. And I'd like to share a video that we launched with our 30-year anniversary that describes the innovation and the original groundbreaking change it made in the industry. It was very disruptive. And this video can explain it better than I can. And some of you might have seen it, but it's a good refresher. And if you're like me and you've got a lot of family and friends that do not work in poultry, and they're always like, man, what do you do something with chickens and eggs? I'm not really sure what it is you do for work. It's a great video link to send them, but it's the Embrex innovation story. So I'll kick it off. The audio starts kind of quiet, and then it'll ramp up.
Middle 1950s, intensive rearing of poultry began. It was not uncommon for farmers to lose 40, 60, 80% of their birds to Embrex disease.
Think a little bit of it like cancer for chickens. When you see 20 to 80,000 animals go down, it's heartbreaking.
And there was no cure.
It's one of the worst diseases any species can have. It was a major, major problem. People didn't know what to do. It is a virus that transmits very well through the environment. It can affect your brain, blood vessels. It can produce you tumors. So it's going to kill the birds no matter what. You cannot grow a flock if you don't have Embrex disease under control.
The cause of Embrex disease was discovered in 1967. A vaccine was developed. But there are some issues that remained. At that time, they were vaccinating in the neck area. Chickens were then let loose and they were immediately exposed to virulent Marek's disease. The idea occurred that could we give the vaccine time to initiate immunity before chickens hatch? A novel vaccination is the immunization of chickens by injecting the vaccine in the egg before hatch. When they were exposed to Marek's disease, they were fully protected. And that was a result beyond anybody's expectations. As you would expect, there was a lot of skepticism. I did not find much acceptance. What changed that was a person came to me, knocked at my door, and he says, Dr. Sharma, I have read your paper, and I'm going to commercialize your technology. That's the start of Embrex.
Embrex was based on the Sharma patent. Taking that from the laboratory to the commercial poultry industry was our challenge. We had this huge device, big machine is what we called it, and it could run about 20,000 eggs an hour. But we would have issues immediately. We would have a device that we thought was ready, and we go to the hatchery, and we brought all our supplies. We brought 6 or 8, 10 people, get everybody there, and we put the first eggs on the device, and it breaks. Stop. We make adjustments. We try again. The scope was learn everything we could about immunology and the physiology of delivery of vaccine. We made probably 4 or 5 iterations of it, simplifying it. The efficacy of the vaccination was better. There's tremendous labor savings. What it has enabled is that we can go from the hatching compartment to the farm in as little as 2 to 4 hours.
In novel vaccination technology is a proposition that seems to be attractive, but is intimidating. That's where the customer service make the difference.
One of the biggest fears was hatch loss. You're going to be punching a hole in the egg, and how's it still going to hatch? We ran them for trials, and we didn't see any loss.
It was about 1990 when we started, when we put the machine in. It was an easier process through the hatchery. The cleanup at the end of the day was much easier. What used to take us about an 8-hour day, we can run in about 4.5 hours now. The cost savings was the big benefit.
From a supplier, we become partner because we are now providing them with solutions.
We started our global expansion. Italy, Spain, UK, South Africa, Middle East, Israel, Argentina, Brazil. There was a cascade. The industry started embracing the technology.
We were the first ones in Colombia. The early protection was one of the most important goals of the Innovo vaccination. To be able to give a high quality day-old chick is rewarding. I think that Innovo is a must.
Zoetis has always been very proactive on their repair and technology. They've done a very good job staying ahead of the game.
We've actually accelerated a lot of our vaccine development to really provide a great solution to our customers. The fact that we've moved towards vectors that can protect against multiple diseases is one of the big evolutions.
Zoetis, and when it was Embrex, has been a great company to work with. Performed a lot of duties for us without ever failing.
It's a major breakthrough, not only for poultry, it's a major breakthrough for science.
To put it in perspective, every day we're injecting, on the average, over 50 million eggs, 20 billion eggs a year. We're helping supply that and making it more efficient.
I think the world's a better place. We're trying to put food on the table for all Americans and even people across the seas.
Trying to make the poultry cheaper has been a goal of all of us.
The biggest thing that I'm proud of is feeding millions and millions of people all around the world.
Seen that video many times, but still really enjoy it. It's a great way to describe what we're doing in business and highlights some of the problems and challenges that Embrex and Innovo technology solved. So if you recall in the video, there's a few main things that it accomplished. One is Marek's vaccination. That was the disease of concern at the time, and still to this day, that needs to be controlled, and vaccination made that possible. The other thing with Innovo is the labor savings, and then less processing time a day hatch to get the chicks to the farm sooner. And those are things that have been somewhat lost with time, but are still really important to highlight to our colleagues and our customers, because we're still providing that benefit. And without Innovo, it wouldn't be there. So let's look at the first aspect of that, and that's Marek's disease. I know we're all really familiar with it. It's the backbone of our vectors. And it's really why Innovo was developed. So if you look here, you can look at the mortality loss over the years. When commercial poultry production became larger, Marek's disease became more prevalent, and it had an extremely high mortality rate. This is a very conservative estimate and only goes to 2020, but if you project that, you could see how many billions of chickens have been saved from mortality due to Marek's disease because of vaccination. But there's been other technologies that have helped with that. And not only are we preventing mortality, but we're preventing some of the morbidity, the condemnations, and the other problems that come along with Marek's: immunosuppression, decreased feed conversion. So you could look here, the condemnation rates were going up along with mortality. And as soon as vaccination began, those rates decreased. And then as other technologies came online, like InnovoJect, it allowed a wider adoption of vaccination, earlier protection, and more effective delivery of those vaccines. So it's better utilized. Coupling that with other innovations within the Embrex portfolio, we've had candling, our vaccine saver technology, egg remover, more adoption of InnovoJect occurred. And then we pair that with our advancements in biologicals. So vector vaccines, this is where a lot of our focus is going. The bigger leaps and bounds in innovation are occurring as vector vaccines. So now we're not just protecting for Marek's Innovo, we're protecting with a lot more diseases through one application process. But Marek's is still the backbone of those vaccines. So this is why Innovo is so important, what it provides, and why people use it. Okay, that's how it came on board in the first place. But what keeps us there, keeps our market share, is our service. So we have an all-inclusive lease program, and then there's no other costs that goes with that. And this is where we continue to win and shine. If you ask customers why they stick with us, our surveys, going around to hatcheries, this is always the commonality that comes up. They like our service, and they are very pleased with how we work with them to partner and to keep their hatchery running, minimizing downtime. Over the years, we've had customers try different competitors, they try other equipment, and ultimately they come back to us because they weren't getting the service needed to continue operating as they needed to be. So we really are proud of this, and we support it in multiple different approaches. We've got our field service and our technical field service, our two main faces in the hatchery. So if you want to think of that as, hey, we've got a mechanical device support team, and then we've got a process and biological support team. So all aspects of this technology and the broader hatchery is being supported. We've also got our account team helping organize this and identify the problems up front. And then you've got our veterinary technical service team following up on the back end and further supported by our diagnostic team in Durham. So when we talk about service, we kind of just lump everything into there together, but it's a lot more than that. Think of it like your truck, right? If you got a truck, it needs to be serviced regularly, oil change, rotate the tires, so it's running as best as it can, it's lasting a long time, and you're getting your desired results. We do the same with our InnovaJect. It's being quarterly serviced. And if there's any other breakdown, we're there to support that 24/7 and get it back to corrective action. But we go beyond just that preventative maintenance service. So when a customer comes on and says, we're going to get a device, whether they're a first-time user or they're upgrading their equipment, we've got a very defined process of how we start them up. And that occurs before we even put the device in there. So we're going to look at the hatchery and determine what risks they have, and are they a good candidate for Innovo, and can they have it there? So that's looking at the facility needs, their space, their air, and their electrical capacity, their sanitation program, and what risks and gaps they have, so that some of that could be identified, corrected, and improved to make them more successful with Innovo. Then when the device gets there, there's a whole installation process. A lot of that is training, so that everybody knows how to utilize the device, run it correctly, how to do troubleshooting, and get to know our team. And then we follow up with all of our other services. And some of you might have seen our new hatchery brochure, and if it hasn't been sent out yet, it will be soon. And it dives more into detail of these, so I won't do that now. But you can see we've got a whole toolbox of options, tools in our pocket to help the customer to support our devices. For example, the process evaluation. It's all about best practices, minimizing risk, and making the most of your investment in Embrex and InnovaJect. So we do, it's essentially an audit. We're comparing the customer's operation of the device to our recommended best practice, identifying that risk. Again, making sure they're making the most use of our product. And they get a scored assessment back with recommendations on how to improve. We provide all the training and certification, all the maintenance, and then you can see a lot of biological things that aren't directly our device, but support it. So we are concerned about the quality of eggs coming to the device, because we can be more successful with good eggs, and so can the customer. Our device touches every egg, so we want to eliminate any undue criticism, but also provide broader support. So if we're doing everything we can, the device is operating well, but they're still not achieving the results they want at the hatchery, we've got a team of experts already there. So how can we help? And that's where a lot of these things like the egg pack assessment comes in, egg crack assessment, these environmental surveys, that we can provide a lot of data and insight that make our device run better, and then also help the hatchery perform with better hatch and better chick quality. So that's our services that we provide. But what really matters about the device is its accuracy, site of injection. And you've probably heard some of our other presentations on this. It's one of my favorite topics. We talk about it a lot because it matters so much. And this, again, is where we are beating our competition time and time again. Service and site of injection. I mentioned that we looked at some other competitor equipment. We are still the most accurate. We can get up to 100% accuracy with a normally developed embryo if you're transferring at the correct timeline. And our customers, or our competitors, cannot achieve this. And why they can't achieve that, we'll get into a little bit later. But site of injection is so important. The other place where we're winning is our customization, our ability to go into multiple different configurations, hatcheries, and incubation types. So our most common configurations, our James Ways, Chick Masters, Petersheims, we can accommodate those flats, go into a hatchery, and we've got a device for it. So even though we're somewhat mass producing the equipment, it's very much on a case-by-case customization level. We can put it in to fit their facility, work with their flat type. So if there's a demand for it, we can build it. It's not the case with our competitors. In fact, our most new to the US competitor, they only make this for one flat type. So Pastorform has Pastorform incubation equipment. They only make a vaccinator for their flat type. And that's going to be that way for the foreseeable future, maybe not always, but we can work with anybody. And that's something we want to capitalize on. So those are some of the main highlights of what has made us successful and where we're at. But let's dive into some of the attributes specifically of our equipment. And the first is our data interface. We're data driven, our customers are data driven, and they continue to tell us we want more data. We want to pull things off the device to make decisions. That's what this is all about. You can see a USB thumb drive here. We can pull information off the device. So all the flock information, number of eggs processed, number of eggs vaccinated, which we do have a hatch prediction equation that is part of this that a customer could take. Hey, how many eggs did I vaccinate? What percent was transferred? How old was that flock? And now I'm getting a prediction of my hatch 3 days in advance. That's more accurate than any other option out there. And we're really accurate at that. So our egg identification, and there is some difference between our legacy and NXT here. So I'm going to speak specifically to NXT, but we're still very accurate for the legacy. We are keeping 100% of those live embryos in the flat and vaccinating all of those accurately to then produce a protected chick. We're removing all infertile eggs, nearly all of our early embryonic dead, and most of our middle dead embryos. So that's great. This accuracy is unmatched, and it's because of our identification system. So when we look at our competitors' equipment that are advertising live, non-live, or heartbeat detection, or whatever marketing name it goes under at their vaccinator, it is less accurate than our opacity identification. The recent tests that we done show that about 0.6 to 0.7% of live embryos are identified as mortality and pulled into the waste with our competitor equipment. And that's kind of across the board for the brands. So pretty significant to lose 0.6% of your embryos just because they are misidentified. So we call that a false negative, right? The device thinks that it is a non-living embryo and it should be pulled. So that's 0.6, 0.7% that could be hatching and leading you to have a higher hatch. Our devices don't do that, and we're very proud of it and want to continue on that. Additionally, all the clear eggs that are being left behind, that's the benefit of our egg remover. We are trying to remove any infertiles or deads that is organic material, it's contamination, it's a breeding ground for bacteria. We want to remove that to have more airflow in the hatchers and reduce our contamination risk. This is another piece of our system that is often taken for granted because most everybody employs it, but we do have some customers that don't and could definitely benefit from it. So we've shown that by removing those early deads, those clear eggs, we're getting better airflow, lower contamination, better chick quality, and better hatch. And in fact, in some of our low fertility flocks that are going to, without an egg remover at the separator, there's so many whole eggs on there that live chicks can be pushed off the roller and then go into the waste. So they're losing chicks that were actually part of the hatch because they have so many infertile eggs that are sending through the rest of the process. So an egg remover is something we should continue to preach about, talk about its benefits. It's a great piece of technology and something that we're better at than our competitors. Now let's move into the meat and potatoes here, which is our vaccination. And we'll start with the first component, which is egg location, our tooling and how it meets up and contacts the egg. Our tooling is adaptable in that we can vaccinate variations in egg size, even within a single flat, and from young to old, and breed differences. So that's a height disparity that our device can accommodate. But also, as eggs are tilted within the flat, we can meet that angle and still achieve a perpendicular injection and punch that will reduce cracking and lead to our famous accuracy for our site of injection. So this adaptive egg location, not every egg is the same size. They're not all going to be perfectly straight up and down. So our device is going to accommodate that. And this is kind of what it looks like. If some of our competitors have this dotted line, this perpendicular, not moving tooling, and depending on how the egg is oriented, the age of the embryo, and their set needle depth, that injection is not going to be to an accurate location to develop an immune response. In fact, it's often going to the cranial, the ocular space, and becoming a potentially lethal injection. When we accommodate to the egg tilt and get the perpendicular punch, we can, again, reduce cracks, but also still achieve our accurate site of injection. So we're adjusting to the egg, but we also have a better needle technology. So it's a dual needle. Our patent on this has since expired, and our competitors are trying to copycat it because they've seen how valuable it is. But we have two needles, and we do that for a reason. They're task specific. So the punch, its only job is to punch the shell of the egg, so that then the internal needle, its sole responsibility is to deliver vaccine and is not contacting the exterior surface of the egg. So we're limiting potential for contamination. We're not bringing exterior contaminants and bacteria to the interior of the egg. And we're reducing cracking, as I mentioned before. The other thing about that is sanitation. We can sanitize so well between each injection cycle because of our dual needle. So if we go back to this picture, I can see in the punch, I've got 4 portholes, 2 here and then 2 here on the opposite sides. So in between each injection cycle, chlorine-based sanitizer is dispensed. The interior and exterior of the punch and the external of the needle is sanitized. So we can prevent crossover, carryover contamination between injection cycles, and it's all clean in place. And when we do that, we provide part of the lease model. We're managing inventory of InnovoTabs, which is a product that is unique to us. They can only get it with our technology, and it's super convenient. We don't have to hand mix bleach anymore. We've got 2 tablets for every 1 gallon that are mixed together. And you know that that ppm is going to be 2,500 within 10% of mixing and be a very effective dose. And we're able to do it at that ppm because it's buffered, so we're not going to gas off here. It's way more stable and is less dependent on water quality because of this formulation. In fact, our newest competitor in the US, when they were doing their testing here at a customer location, they were using our InnovoTabs as part of their sanitation because they saw it so effective. Again, we manage that inventory and that situation has been corrected, but even our competitors see the advantage to our sanitation system. All those things add up to still influence our site of injection. So we're going to come back to it for just a second. We want to be accurate because if we're not putting the vaccine into the embryo or the amnion, we're not getting an immune response. We could achieve that because of our proper egg location and trajectory, and our needle depth, and our support with studies and our technical service team to ensure they're transferring at the right time. I mentioned our set needle depth. We do have some competitors who have adjustable needle depth, and they've done that as a necessity because they can't locate as well as us, and they can't accommodate tilt of the embryo. What has challenged them is with that adaptable penetration depth, they have backed themselves into a corner and led to inaccurate injections. A lot of interperitoneal vaccinations actually is what we found, or air cells. So over and under penetration is very common in those devices. So what we're really after is reliable accuracy, delivering to the same spot every time. And here again, reemphasize how important that is. If we vaccinate in the amniotic fluid or into the embryo, generally subcutaneous or intermuscular in the right breast tissue, we are getting good protection. We're vaccinating the allantoic fluid or the air cell, which is common in missed injections of competitors. We're not getting an immune response. And visually, here's where we're trying to go. So we're also able to achieve that because of proper embryo development. And some of our competitors that are advertising 100% amnion, or we're going to get it in this place every time, they are targeting a very specific transfer time and don't have any flexibility there. And even with that, still have low accuracy. So because of our set needle depth, our adaptive egg location, and our technical support, we have a window of opportunity that we could transfer within. So we recommend to our customers that they transfer between 17 days, 12 hours, and 19 days, 4 hours. Of course, depending on incubation type and breed, there's going to need to be some fine tuning, which we help support. But as long as their chicks have moved their head to the right and they're not externally pipping, we can achieve that accuracy. And that's not the case for other equipment out there. So we're transferring at the correct time, but we want to make sure that our vaccine that gets there is also in good shape, that it's going to do what it's supposed to. So that's vaccine integrity. We have chosen the right pumps and needle size over time to make sure that those vaccine cells are still alive at time of deposition. Again, this is something we support in the field. If there's any question of this or validation needed, we have tools in the toolbox to demonstrate this to the customer. And we have a set vaccine volume. 50 microliters per embryo is what we're delivering. So all manufacturers of vaccine, including our competitors, when they list their dosage, they're dosing it to our dispense volume of 50 microliters. So even though competitive equipment has adjustable volume as well, they're dosing based off of us because it's been so proven. When competitors are saying, hey, we can deliver more or less volume, there's other ways that we can achieve half dose of vaccine if a customer desires that. But when we start to get in high volume dispense, you can disrupt the osmotic balance in the embryo, and especially with early transfers, it can decrease hatch and decrease chick quality as well. So something to keep in mind as far as why that dosage is chosen and how we continue to service and maintain that. Moving on to the back of the device, that kind of covers vaccination, but our transfer table, another, I guess, kind of forgotten concept of our equipment because it's so commonplace and it's part of our vaccination equipment, but a necessary process in the hatchery. The simplicity of moving our eggs from the setter trays, the flats, into the hatch basket to go into the hatcher. It's got to happen, so we're combining multiple processes here, helping with that labor savings and efficiency. And again, we're troubleshooting here and making sure we're not cracking eggs in the process. There are other transfer equipment out there, not associated with injection equipment, that say the turkey or layer industry is using, but they still don't have the service model, and they're still asking us, hey, how can you help us with transfer, just because we want the service and known equipment to go with that. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the benefits of Innovo, why we're still the best. Want to make sure to save lots of time for questions and also reemphasize why we're still the best, right? We've been looking at competitor equipment. We're more accurate in our site of injection. We're more accurate in our egg identification, and we definitely excel in our quality and level of service. So let's capitalize on those things, you know, and remember that we do those so well that our competitors out there at this point, they're really trying to achieve copycats. So some of the things we hear out there is, hey, we can give 100% amnion all the time, right? Without the data. So sometimes it's best for us to facilitate the conclusion with our customer. We've got the data and we could show that to them. But sometimes we can ask the question of how can they achieve 100% amnion if that embryo is over 19 days of incubation and the amnion is nearly gone and that chick's already pipped? Lead with the question and maybe the customer can think of that as well. Another thing that we hear from customers about other equipment out there is how beautiful their displays are. And so although that's great, we still want to focus on the science of what's important for the device. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions. I think the mutes are unlocked.
Hey Josh, I had someone send me a question. You know, you mentioned the hatch prediction equation sheet. So give us a little history on that and where is that and anything you know about it.
Sure. So it was a multi-million egg, multi-hatchery project of looking at what percentage of embryos are being vaccinated based on the data from our device and our egg identifier, comparing that with what flock age it was, and then the actual hatch, because there's a biological norm of late embryonic mortality. And then now we've got a pretty accurate prediction of what the hatch will be based upon percent injected at transfer. That equation has been around for some time, and some customers, that's part of their normal operation. Every hatchery, after every hatch, they're putting it into that. This process is going to be somewhat streamlined with our PoultryView 360 and remote connectivity that we're going to have soon. But meanwhile, if you need this equation, it is in the hands of every field service specialist, every technical service representative, and all the account managers as well. So right now it's an Excel file that's locked. It has the formulas. All they have to do is pull the information from the device and plug it in. But more streamlined to be coming soon in PoultryView.
Josh, is that an equation that we patent? Do we have a patent on that, or is that one that the industry uses?
We don't have a patent on it, but it is specific to us. We developed it, but we give it openly to all of our customers.
Hey, Josh. Hey, Josh. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead. All right. Thanks, John. So, Josh, Roger here. Not a question, but maybe a comment. The importance of the validation of our devices around function, the unknowns with the emphasis on data. Thanks for bringing that up. I think I just want to share the thought that we should continue to focus on the accuracy of the data, which leads to functionality of the identifiers. So I think it's a big point to make. Our unknowns, accuracy, our target is 1% or less. And if we're above that, then we need to, all of us need to understand what the source of the issues are to maintain that accuracy. You spoke well about our competitive advantage based on our accuracies, but it's dependent upon us. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, great point. And everybody knows Roger. He leads our field service team out west here, and he's our kind of egg identification in-house expert. So any questions, ask him. But that's part of our service, right? Is validating and ensuring the data is accurate. So we know that our technology is capable. We got to maintain that. So if anybody says, "Hey, my number of unknowns on my data on the device is above that 1% Roger mentioned," let us know and we can help with that, because there's some equipment things that could be looked at, but there's also a lot of operational pieces. We do have 2 great settings on the device that can help with that. So if they're running really low fertility flocks, we have a low fertility setting. If they're running very small eggs from very young flocks, we have a small egg setting that can help in those situations and make the data more accurate. Dr. Schaefer, do you have something?
Yeah, Josh, nice presentation. For better or for worse, I've been around long enough to see this technology from just being an idea in somebody's head to where it is today. And regarding sanitation, I remember the day when the motto was "We owe it all to Garrisol," and now we're in an antibiotic-free situation in most hatcheries, and still functioning quite well. So it's a very positive commentary on how the technology has evolved over time. But regarding sanitation, I know egg pack and poor egg quality and older flocks coming into the hatchery and challenging our system has been a constant source of concern, and in some cases led certain producers to conclude that maybe they're better off with no Embrex injection or an ovo injection in certain types of age flocks and certain types of the year. And then we also have the problem of the transient labor in hatcheries and maybe not necessarily the most competent people operating the equipment. Any ideas around how to address some of these things that seem to be on the horizon here or with us currently to optimize the NovaJect function?
Yeah, definitely all points that should be on the forefront of our mind. And so when I think of competition, let's back up a little bit. We've got multiple categories. We've got one, which is competitor brands of Enovo vaccination, other pieces of equipment. Our other competitor is ulterior or alternate methods of vaccination. So subcutaneous essentially could deliver most of these same products. And the other is no vaccination. That's also a competitor. But if we think of the benefit of Enovo, why they should do it, that's where we need to come back to in these situations. So why vaccinate for Embrex? Well, we know what it does for it impacts feed conversion, it's immunosuppressive, it can lead to condemnations and mortality at challenging times. But like you said, we have a lot of customers that are saying they're in a low challenge area and they're willing to chance it. I would argue against that, but in those situations, get our vet team involved, be out in the field, and we can really see what the challenge is. I know Dr. Jordan and I are working on some field surveillance for Embrex and vaccine take testing that he'll probably give more information on the future that can help in that very scenario. So that's on the non-vaccination side. But when it comes to why they would chance it in the first place, a lot of it is the labor and the egg quality. And that's an unfortunate industry trend that it's beyond our control, but we could still help support from a service side. We have thinner egg shell, fewer eggs per hen, and lower fertility and lower hatch overall industry-wide. Not necessarily a result of Enovo, but it impacts us because people are trying to achieve every percent hatch and just say, let's try not vaccinating. So how can we help with egg pack quality? Well, we could be at the breeder farm. We could be helping with management, with the team. And then at the hatchery, our technical service representatives can be doing egg pack assessments, which is one more task to do. But if it helps defend our business, we can do that. The dirtier the eggs coming into the device, the more challenge it has to overcome. We've got great onboard sanitation, as I mentioned, but in reality, it can only overcome so much. So we think that we still have the superior sanitation system, but it's going to be overburdened at some point. So that's where our environmental surveys and process evaluation come in. Are people using that device accordance to best practices to minimize risk and get the most use out of the fail safes we've already got built in? And that's where I see a lot of this challenge. And oftentimes when people say we stopped vaccinating because our eggs are so bad, we want to see if we can improve our hatch, we're just not going to vaccinate. Most of those hatcheries also had operational challenges and weren't using the device as best it could be anyway. So get our field service and technical field service teams involved in those situations. So that's probably the first thing that I would do. And then we can support that with environmental surveys as well. And that goes for old flocks as well. People saying, hey, I've got poor labor is one, eggshell quality is another, and then old flocks is a different category. But does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hey, Josh, I know it sounds like probably no competitor is really going to be able to compete long term, but based upon the different competitors out there, which one is the closest, or which one is a legitimate competitor? Any thoughts on that, or none of them really?
Yeah, it depends on what aspect and what market. That's one thing I've noticed doing these trials is different markets are going to prefer a different competitor for different reasons. So, for example, like a C2E cat or a Viscon, they have full lines of automation for transfer and day of hatch processing. So those companies that want a one-stop shop are often preferring an inferior, if you will, Enovo device because they get that whole package and they just have one phone call to make. We still think our device is superior in our services, but that's something that people like about those competitors. As far as accuracy and injection, as advertised on paper, Past Reform is likely the biggest competitor based upon that and perception. but in reality is maybe another case. We haven't done our measurements on that device yet, but hearing from customers and seeing what else is out there, we don't think they're achieving that. So those are kind of the three main ones. So Sonovo has exited the market. I won't recap all Carrie's everything from NSM, but she did have kind of a presentation on that others can reference. Those are the biggest that's out there: Pastorform, ECAT, and Viscon. Those are probably the big three. The only one that is in use here in the US is really Viscon and Pastorform at this time. And they're all trying to get into the market, right? They're trying to get here. So they're doing that through a few ways. One is price. They're purchase, not lease. So Pastorform can say, hey, we're going to throw this in for free with your incubators. So if you're building a multi-million-dollar hatchery, that small line item that's either free or a small price is nothing. So decision makers are choosing it based upon price. So again, we need to go back to what benefits we have over that, and how in the long term, this lease model continuing to deliver as expected is beneficial. So those are the three big competitors.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, we've got a question about the challenges around the dirty egg pack and whether double sanitation helps with that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, good question. So for those of you who are unaware, we do have a double dispense of sanitation option on our devices. However, I would discourage that. And anytime a customer wants to do that, make sure that we are making that change and it's approved by us, because that's going to do a few things. One, they're going to go through twice as many Innova tabs, and we're managing their inventory. But also, our internal studies have shown that one dispense is sufficient to alleviate any bioburden that is on the needle, the punch, and can overcome whatever egg pack challenges there are. And if they're beyond that one dispense need, a two dispense is not going to fix that, if you will. So it's more of a perception challenge that we're trying to battle here. If people are saying, I'm going to do two dispenses and that's going to help, that kind of undermines our data and need for why we have our one dispense designed at that volume and that ppm in the first place. So if that comes up with a customer, loop myself and the TSR in, we can discuss that. There's unique situations where it might be needed, and that's why that option is there. We like to give options, but make sure that we're managing that process, again, mainly due to the Innovo tab inventory.
So if I could ask something on that line, our sanitation system is primarily designed just to sanitize and sterilize the needle and the punch. It's not designed as an egg wash system. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I'm glad you brought that up, because most of our customers who request the double sanitation are wanting it not because they question the sanitation of our needle and punch, but they believe their eggs are so bad they want chlorine put on them and want our device to do that. So our device was not designed to do that, and we don't have claims to do it. But again, if a customer wants it for that purpose, let's talk about it before we change any settings.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Anything else?
I don't see any more questions in the chat, Josh. Oh, Stoney, did you have something? Maybe
But
not.
I've had something come up with customers as far as the Innova tab concentration, and our labeling on the Innova tab container. On the container itself, there's a statement that it only guarantees a minimum 22-21 ppm, and I think that particular statement's on there for EPA concerns only, and we can pretty much guarantee that we can get to 2,500 ppm. Would you be able to elaborate on that as far as the challenges with that statement on the container?
Yes, I can. So without getting into detail, for everybody, our Novo tabs are designed for 2,500 ppm of active chlorine in solution. So it's 2 tablets per gallon. And on our process evaluation and our recommendations is, hey, be within 10% of the target. So that makes up for manufacturing, batch variation of the tablets. That makes up for water quality, which is a big one. That can take away your ppm, and to make sure that people are thoroughly mixing it. So if they use 2 tabs, properly mix it where they're fully dissolved and agitate it, they should be reaching that. So again, that 10% is for variation. And what Kevin's alluding to is on the label, some questions come up where it doesn't say within 10%, but there's a minimum guarantee of ppm on their dosage. And these tablets are manufactured not in the United States. They are ours. And their manufacturing testing methodologies is different than that of EPA's, which we get by the label. And so they are essentially making an average of averages. And those of you who are statistician nerds know that that's probably not the best thing to do. And because of that rounding, the EPA required that on the label. So we can still, we know we're going to get within 10% of that 2,500, but the label doesn't say that, and customers have asked about it. So we are working on changing the wording in our process evaluation to match the label, so there's no question. But really the number that's on the label is guaranteeing it within, it was like 11.2% of the target level, whereas before we were at 10%. So in practicality, it doesn't change anything for the field, but it is a label discrepancy because of the EPA measurement that has worried some customers. And now we're all experts with the Novo labels. Does that answer your question, Kevin, and what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just wanted a little better explanation than I can give.
Yeah, that's my understanding, but yeah, I'd say the PE wording will address that, and it's still at 2,500. We're verifying that with our titration that we do during a process evaluation, and most customers are also using in-house test strips to make sure they're in the ballpark.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Josh. We really appreciate it. This was recorded, and we'll get this up on JAM, and I'll let everybody know as soon as it's available. And thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.